We are very lucky to live in his presence, and he is India's top public intellectual. He is a lawyer, he is an activist. I describe him as a warrior. He has fought corporate groups. He's a nationalist, he's a journalist, he's an editor. The most powerful of politicians come to him for advice, and we are very lucky to have him as our mentor here at the Republic Media Network. And he has been my mentor for a long time, and he has always supported me in everything that I have done. So, Mr. Gurumurthy, I think we're all looking forward very much, sir, to hearing you today in our closing session. Thank you for being with us, sir. Thank you.
Namaskarams to all. Arnab introduced me, among other things, that I'm an economist. In fact, I learned my economics in the streets of India. The society was the open-air university for me to learn about economics. Though I was a student of economics, I had familiarity with economics of different kinds, whether it is the Marxist economics or the Weberian economics or the market economics, which has been sweeping the world for the last 30 years. I am fairly familiar with economics as a subject, as a theory, but I became more familiar with economics when I was asked to lead the Swadeshi movement in the 1990s. When I took that responsibility, I was a corporate advisor and I had my own claims about understanding modern business, modern finance, law. But everybody asked, what has he to do with Swadeshi? To talk of Swadeshi those days, which is translated into Atmanirbharta today in India, and economic nationalism abroad, to talk about Swadeshi those days was a demeaning affair. In fact, when I addressed the administrative staff college in Hyderabad, a large crowd was there. In those days, I was the only person presenting the alternative viewpoint, so I used to get a lot of crowd. Just as a curiosity as to what this man talks against globalization. Globalization was the mantra. It was a one-way traffic. If anybody talked against globalization, there is something wrong with this man. That was the kind of assumption. There was a wholesale defection of the whole world. From the socialist state-controlled model to the market model. Nobody understood what it was, but everybody said it is the American model, which is the model for the world, and so everybody defected to that. But some of us felt that this is something seriously wrong, because I had deep connections with the corporate India and I had discussions with them, and nobody was clear about what was happening. I must have met at least some 20, 30 industrialists to find out, what do you understand about this globalization? They said, we don't know what this new animal will do. There was only one man who had some clarity about that. I will talk later. But the fact remains that it was swimming against current those days. What is now being talked about, accepted, and even America holds, Trump America says, economic nationalism was the Swadeshi at that time in India. So in the Administrative Staff College of India, when I began addressing about Swadeshi, and I began explaining that this globalization is an unsustainable proposition. You cannot have global order without a global government, and you cannot create a global government means you cannot have a global order, economic order also. But at that time, everything was centered on one power, a single power, America. And so whatever they wanted the world to do, the world accepted to do. And it was founded on one ideological premise, which Francis Fukuyama wrote in his book, The End of History and the Lost Man, that the Western order has finally won against the rest, and it is best for the rest to follow the West, was the basis of globalization. So it may be the liberal democracy or market, free market, or the Western way of life. Everything became acceptable as the universally valid proposition world over. And so some of us who opposed it were regarded as, some people called us Neanderthal economists, that we are taking the country thousands of years back. So in the Administrative Staff College of India, when I was addressing, an official stood up, a former government official stood up and said, people like you must be shot dead because you are taking the country 500 years back. That was the discourse in India. It was against the discourse we were swimming. I had seen industrialists being advised by the government officials, you better sell your industry today to foreigners, otherwise you will sell them as scrap tomorrow. This was the national situation. So, if you have to understand what is happening today, you have to go 30 years back in 1991. As compared to that, today, 900 million Indians were born after 1991. And 360 million have died. And so 600 million Indians who are 18 and 35 were born after 1991. They may not even know what happened at that time. So there has been a massive shift in the country between 1994 and 2025. The world has turned upside down. From a conflict-free world, which was promised as the final victory of the West over all conflict, so that the West will ensure that there is no conflict in the world, we were all lured into that order, the order of peace, prosperity. And what was globalization? In fact, many people used to ask me, what is Swadeshi? I used to say, Swadeshi, the nation is the core. The global is the additive. It is not that we can live without the world. We have to live with the world. But the world will only contribute to you. You have to be the core. The national effort has to be the core. The national confidence, the national effort, the national policies, and the national industries, and the national parties, political parties. All of them had lost confidence at that time. We all used to say that we have to be a nation first, because they said the world is one village and the idea of nation itself is outdated. That was the discourse at that time. And globalization was defined. The world as the core and nation as the additive. This was the difference between globalization and national economics. But from that time today, if you look at where the world stands, there have been three distinct changes. One, a single one-pole power position, the world has shifted to multipolarity. Multipolar world is not a formal world. Informally, the power has diffused from one source to lot of middle countries rising to share the power. Under the Center for Foresight of the European Commission said, by 2030, there will be no hegemonic power in the world, and there will be multipolar power, each country exercising power in its own way, with its resources, with its influence and sphere, with its education, with its strength, with its demography. So it said that the world is moving towards what the world was in 1990s to a very different picture emerges. The next is We were all told modernity means only what the West stands for, because the West drew its modernity from the days of enlightenment, the single source of modernity. But now it is accepted. There are multiple modernities in the world. In 2007, Sebastian Conrad, he was one of the greatest historians, and he came with his thesis that each civilization modernizes in its own way. Japan modernizes as Nihon Jinran. China modernizes as Neo-Confucian society. So nobody wants to adopt one way of modernity, one dress, one language, one way of life. And so India will also modernize in its own way. So this is not what the Indian discourse, Indian media, Indian academics, Indian political parties, or the Indian administrative service speak about. But the fact is, we are also modernizing in our own way. This is a new concept. It is not that the world is becoming multipolar without becoming multi-modern. Modernity has asserted itself in the last 25-30 years. I will give you examples. The post-World War II world order was anti-civilizational. In 1951, the United Nations Measures for the Development of Underdeveloped Nations, which was largely drafted by the United States of America, said that if you want to develop, you have to scrap your philosophy. You have to scrap your social relationship. You have to become part of what the West is for you to develop. And any society which is unable to accept this will have to accept low standard of life. This was an official advisory of the United Nations on the basis of which policies were being made by all the underdeveloped countries. And there was no difference between the free market society and communists, because both of them hated civilization, and America, of course, had no civilization at all. And so all of them were anti-civilizational according to them. Unless you forget the past, disown the past, scrap the past, hate the past, you can never develop. This was the accepted position in the world, including in India. And China even went to the extent of waging a war against its civilization in the Cultural Revolution. For 9 years, they destroyed everything worth having regarding the past, whether it is Confucius' name, whether it is Buddhism, whether it is any statue or Buddha Vihara. They destroyed everything. But that Chinese Communist Party leader, Xi Jinping, in 2021, when he addressed the centenary of the Communist Party, he said, 10,000-year-old Chinese civilization will guide us today and forever in future, because they have no other identity than to go back to their past. Russia, which killed millions of people to destroy its past, in 2024, Putin declared Russia as a civilizational state. You know, every society is now coming into its own, and that is the beginning of what can be called civilizational nationalism, and which is spreading in India also. Now I will go into what is happening in the world in the sense of how nationalism is getting into economics. I'm just quoting, just you touch artificial intelligence about economic nationalism. This is what it says. Economic nationalism is experiencing a significant global resurgence, marked by retreat from globalization and prioritization of national economic and security interests over international cooperation. This trend is evident in policies worldwide, particularly in the United States, China, and the European Union, driven by geopolitical tensions, supply chain vulnerabilities, and domestic political pressures. A research done by Cambridge University's 3 scholars, I am just quoting it. The paper which they have produced examines the resurgence of industrial policy and national security across the United States, China, and the European Union. We analyze how these 3 major economic powers are implementing distinct approaches to industrial policy while pursuing similar objective in technological leadership and also national economic prosperity. The US has adopted a hawkish stance with extensive trade policies and subsidies. China has pursued ambitious growth in the range of sectors with long-term planning and strong governmental control. Even the European Union has begun doing it. So what we fought for in India in 1990s is what the world is doing today. It is not because we were the forerunners, but the fact is the idea of globalization, the project of globalization founded on the supremacy of the West over the rest forever has collapsed. Globalization has collapsed because it was a collapsible model. Why it collapsed? The background to the collapse of globalization are 3 major events. One was the 2008 financial crisis of America, which was founded on the basis that one superpower with its super currency, with its super efficient economic model, will be able to guide the whole world in that direction. That was the basis of globalization. And the financial model was so perfected that dollar, which had the backing of gold and was considered equal to gold, and even after the gold ceased to be backing the dollar, in 1990s, the dollar unbacked by anything other than the name United States of America became equal to gold and became even more valuable than the gold. So in 1998, when the financial collapse occurred, even the greatest economists could not explain why the collapse occurred. In fact, Alan Greenspan, who headed the US Federal Reserve System for 19 years, he was examined by the Congress. He was called the god of money. He could create money out of thin air. In 1997, he addressed the Stanford University. I couldn't understand why he addressed the Stanford University. He should have addressed the US Federal Reserve System. He said it is not possible to control the supply of dollars outside. And so we will not be able to fight inflation. So they decided to import goods from cheaper sources to contain inflation and print and export dollars. So in 1989, The Economist magazine said, the most profitable industry in America is the printing and exporting of dollars. So America exported dollars, printed and exported dollars, because the American name carried that weight in the world, and imported goods. With the result, between 1976 and now, America has printed and exported $15 trillion worth of dollars and imported goods. And for that, it brought down the tariffs, and it made the whole world search the American market, which was, of course, taken advantage of by China. And now America finds that dollar is no more the admired currency. And in fact, dollar is now an enforced currency. For instance, if this BRICS will produce its own monetary system, Trump said, I will finish you if you don't use dollar. From an admired currency, dollar has become an autocratic power-backed currency. You can understand the shift that has taken place in the American economy. And what Trump is trying to do is to reverse it. He is trying to put up the tariffs to ensure that the imports come down or the import prices are up, so that the people pay for the deficits which America has incurred in the past. As I told you, $15 trillion is the current account deficit. And every year they are incurring a budget deficit of $1.2 trillion. And it is deficit at home and deficit abroad. America is in an unenviable position, and Trump is trying to ensure that at least fight this trend. I can understand if anybody is advising Trump, they will advise this. But the problem of America is not an economic problem. It's a much deeper problem. America has attuned itself to over-living. Every economist today accepts that America, American families, American corporates, American government, they spend more than what they earn. That is the most important thing. For example, whether it is because the families have collapsed. The family support mechanism, which is essential for a society, about which I will deal with when I come to the Indian context, that it is a sharing mechanism. I was in America, in UCLA, when I was addressing the management students. I asked all the management students a question. Who are all supported by your family for your higher education? All Indians and Asians raised their hand. Not a single white student raised the hand. Then I asked them the question, who is taking educational loan and studying this course? All the white students raised their hand. I came to IIT Madras. I asked the same question to the MBA students. Who are borrowing money and studying MBA? Not a single student raised the hand. Who are all being supported by your families for your higher education? Everyone raised their hand. This is the family support mechanism. And the family support mechanism is the social capital which America has lost. And the American government went to the extent of telling the Americans in 1960s, which was the turning point of America beginning to decline, that you need not take care of your parents, you need not take care of anybody. You pay us 12%, 12.5% social security tax, we will take care of everybody. At that time, in 1980, many economists warned the American government. If you want, you can Google and get a beautiful book, US Economy in Transition, by the National Bureau of Economic Research in 1980, where the economists told the American government, don't interfere with the intergenerational obligations of people. The government can never substitute itself in the place of the family. And it said, we have already handed over the kitchen to multinationals. In America, nobody cooks. There is no kitchen in home. It is only the malls which give you food. You take home, heat it up and eat it. And he said, if there is no kitchen, and if there is no responsibility to take care of the parents and youngsters, educate them, then what is the function left in the family? A functionless family can never last. This was the advice given by economists, including Milton Friedman, who got the Nobel Prize in 1965 on the monetary theory. But American politicians were also like our politicians. He said, don't worry, we will take care of you. We will do this. We will do this. With the result, the American government has become virtually insolvent today only because of the dollar strength. The American government is surviving. And in fact, if there is so much of current account deficit, the dollar should be losing its value according to economics, rules of economics. So a question was asked, how is it when the current account deficit is zooming, the dollar value is not coming down, it is going up? So two Harvard economists came out with a fantastic explanation that the dollar value is not governed by the rules of economics, it is governed by the rules of physics. What is the rule of physics? There is a dark matter which sustains the universe. That is the rule of physics. So there is a dark matter which sustains the dollar. What is the dark matter? the American strength, the American power, the American influence, the American acceptability, the American military. This is the dark power which sustains the dollar. And you see now, that dark power is shaking. That is the problem of America, which Trump is trying to handle. And now, the entire globalization, as I told you, is based on the victory of the West over the rest, and particularly Asia. But that is now turning. Now, the rise of Asia, China, India, Indonesia, and generally the global South, is demolishing the very theory of globalization, and I am going to tell you what is likely to happen in future. By 2050, China will be the #1 economy in the world. That is undisputed. Who will be the #2 economy? It is neck and neck between India and America. Neck and neck. The unanimous opinion. And European Union, its share will get reduced to less than 10%. And emerging market economies, E7, out of the 7 top nations in the world, 6 out of 7 emerging market economies will be the top 7 economies. This is the global picture. And how it came, you will be amazed. Because unless you have a helicopter view to understand how the theoretical foundations of Western economics developed and how they assessed the rest of the world, and particularly to large countries like India and China, you cannot understand where the West went wrong. 2 great minds in the West, one Karl Marx, another Max Weber, they shaped the modern West. In fact, Max Weber was supposed to be the founder of modern Western liberal society based on individualism. And Max Weber and Karl Marx, their assessment of India and China is worth quoting. Karl Marx wrote an article, 2 articles, in the New York Herald Tribune in 1853, where he said India is a country which is a very unique country. Its economy is organized on the basis of village republics. People are very happy. There is no exploitation. The gap between the producer and the consumer is so little. It is some kind of a primitive socialism. But unfortunately, this country has not changed for the last 2,000 years. It is worshipping cows and monkeys, and so it is a semi-barbaric society. That there was no economic problem, but this society is worshipping monkeys and cows. And he was the guy who influenced almost the whole of India after independence. Every left, liberal, progressive thinker would somewhat relate to Karl Marx in India. And so he convinced the West that India is a semi-barbaric society. And then Max Weber, he was the one who conceptualized the Western development model as based on Protestant Christian ethics, based on individualism, enterprise, and that is the basis of entrepreneurship, which is the basis of modern capitalism. He was right, because for 30 years he studied the Protestant and Catholic societies and came to the conclusion the Catholic societies can never match the Protestant societies in entrepreneurship, which is true, because all the Protestant nations were going up in economic growth, and all the Catholic nations were lagging behind. But he wrote 2 books on India and China. He said, these 2 societies can never come up because they believe in karma and rebirth, which works against a spirit of enterprise. And so these 2 societies will never come up. But unfortunately, the research done by Paul Byrock and Angus Madison that came between 1980 and 2001, which said for 1700 years, India and China were the leading economic engine of the world. In 1750, the combined share of GDP of India and China was 58%, and that of England and America 2%. In 1900, the whole thing turns upside down. India and China crashed to 8%. China 6.8% and India 1.2%. And England and America raised to 42%. This data was not available to Karl Marx or Max Weber. If they had this data, they would never have said that a country like India and China can never develop. This is where the West went wrong. When they globalized, they thought this globalization will benefit only people who know how to operate economics. China did not know how to operate economics, but it knew how to operate the people who operate economics, and they looted America. America produced a Frankenstein monster by giving more MFN facilities to China, giving them all the technologies, and China became the factory to produce goods for America. And of course, all kinds of political influences were there to defeat Russia, which was the greatest ambition of America, which made them expand the NATO, which has resulted in the Ukraine war, benefited China. But India was always careful. Whether it is this party or that party ruling, we calibratedly accepted globalization. We never wholeheartedly accepted globalization. It is because the society of India would never allow globalized ideas to enter. And that is the reason why we are a different society. Now, I will come to it a bit later as to what we mean by Atmanirbharta. Before that, I will have to deal with Trump's MAGA. Trump's MAGA is the first major admission of the failure of globalization. Because he was the only one to say there is no globalism hereafter. It is America first. Once you call a nation first, the first thing you reject is globalization and international cooperation. That is the first thing. Second thing is MAGA implies that America, which was great, has ceased to be great. It has to be made great again. He is the first person to admit the decline of America. That is what has made Americans support him in such large measure in 2024. Apart from the fact that there are other problems associated with America which is not discussed very deeply in the public discourse, but which we must know. The media in India, the intellectuals in India, the academics in India must know this. You know, in 1960, of the American population, 87.5% were non-Hispanic white population. About 11% was black, and the balance 1 or 2% were others. It was at that time Kennedy declared that we will build a global, we will invite the whole world to build America, and they went on to, at that time the civil rights movement was there. Till then they allowed only white immigrants. So when the civil rights movement came, multiracial immigration came into America. You know what is the position of America today? Today, 58% is only the white Hispanic, non-Hispanic whites. America is ceasing to be a white nation. America called itself a WASP nation, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant nation. This was the identity of India given by Samuel Huntington in 1998 when he was thrashed. But there is a racial element in America today. All of you are seeing it. And that racial element is powering the Republican Party. And this whole idea of fight against immigration and the idea of tariff are only externalities. So there is a deeper racial drive. And where it will land America, God alone knows, but I will give you only 2 indications of what is happening. You know, Pew Research in America, it's one of the most premier research institutions. It came out in the paper in 2020 that in America there is a bipartisan politics is the only point of commonality in America. There is no other commonality in this country. In 2015, the Time magazine wrote about the commonality in generally the Christian nations. There are 30,000 canonized saints in Italy. Every locality has one. In America, till today, there are only 3 canonized saints. There is no sacred place. There is no sacred mountain. There is no sacred river. America is a real estate. There is no common point of Americans except the American Constitution, courts, and what they call as the American way of life. With the result, now 60% of the Republicans won't marry into Democrats' houses. 65% of the Democrats won't marry into Republican houses. There is a vertical division in the society. And the division is in the family. Father and son are not talking. Daughter and mother are not talking. And it has seared the society so much. In 2022 September, you can Google and read, 6 defense secretaries and 5 American chiefs of staff wrote a letter to Pentagon. If a Trump or Trump-like figure contests the 2024 election and loses, there will be civil war in America, and the army will not maintain neutrality. And the civil war will not be at the border. It will be based on color. It will be based on religion. It will be based on region. This is the state of America. Because it doesn't have one common base. It is a top-down nation. Then I immediately I was there for 3 days in Kumbh Mela. 65 crore people are assembled. Who invited them? What brought them together? It's some consciousness. It is a bottom-upwards nation. They are top-down nations. Arun Shourie has written it beautifully in his secular agenda. How the European nations were formed. They were formed by marriages. They were formed by concubinages. They were formed by conquests. When France was formed, less than 3% of the people knew the French language. When Italy was formed, less than 7% of the people knew Italian language. It is the powerful people who brought the people together, shaped them into nation, and turned them into what it is only in this 18th and 19th centuries. The idea of nation state developed in the West. So, these are basically unstable societies, including in America. Everybody thinks America is a very stable country, but I want all of you to very critically study what is happening in America, which will show that America is moving towards a crisis, and it is not only moving towards a crisis, it will land the whole world in crisis because it has integrated the whole world to such an extent that whether it is in terms of dollars or in terms of, 16% of America today consists of immigrants. And those 16% immigrants, if you calculate, nearly 30 crore people are linked to America. And it is investment, it is trade, industries, employment. Everything is linked through dollar. And that society and that state is in a critical condition. So 4 dates completely changed this world. One is the general financial crisis in 2008. Second is the COVID. And the third is the Ukraine war. Henry Kissinger, who shaped the post-World War order, post-Cold War order, he said as soon as the COVID advent came, the world order will change forever. And in 2022, when Ukraine war came, he addressed the economist meeting in Switzerland. And he said that unless this war is ended soon, the world order will be restructured forever. Trump has begun doing it in 2025. This is how we should understand, Because America now feels it cannot take the responsibility of running the world. And it wants to go back to the isolation policy which it adopted till the early 20th century. And at this point, I must mention there is a paradigm shift in the world between 1990s now. In 1990s, you go into any economic literature, there is nothing called environment. There was no relationship between environment and economics. But today, you cannot separate economics from environment. Because environment has become one of the biggest problems of the world. In 1990, the world discharged 6 billion tons of CO2. In 1990, 22 billion. Today, 37 billion. And so far, of all the greenhouse gas emissions, the share of America is 25%. The share of Europe is 20%. These people have dirtied the world and developed themselves. And now they are saying, you should not dirty it. This is going to be a huge development versus economics. And that's where the turning point, many people have not noticed it. It is becoming a very important geopolitical turning point when the Prime Minister mentioned in 2023 G20 meeting, one earth, one family, one future. This captured the relationship between economics and environment. In fact, how? We are a living example of it. Many people do not know. In fact, I have mentioned it in some of the programs in Republic. How India is a living example of alignment between economics and environment. I will take only 3 issues. One is food. We are just 2.4% of global land area. We have 18% of human population. We have 30% of bovine population. Our total cattle population is 42%. We have 8% bioresources. It is an ecological wonder as to how in such a small place, such huge human, animal, bovine population could live together. Take America. It is 3.5 times the size of India. But its bovine population is 1/5. How is it that we are able to feed all this? In fact, I saw the statistics in 1960s when we did not have food. But at that time, the cattle population kept increasing and we did not eat the cattle. Because we felt that they have also the right to live. All this was achieved by one factor, the proportion between meat and cereal in India. Our average consumption of meat is 3.5 kg per head per annum. We are also non-vegetarians. 75% of the Indians are non-vegetarians. But for us, meat is only sabji. It is not the main take. Because we were cereal eaters, cereals give you 83% of the calorie value. And meat gives only 17% of the calorie value. Cereals give you 37% of the protein value. And meat gives only 37% of the protein value. With the result, India is able to feed its huge population by the additional energy that you get from cereals. And you look at America, it is the reverse. Their average meat consumption is 124 kg per head per annum. And the cereal consumption is far less, about 68 kgs per annum. What is the difference? If all Indians take to American way of eating, we will need 6 times the agricultural land we have. Our country's size has to be 2.5 times more. If the entire world takes to Indian way of eating, we will need only 40% of the agricultural land we are cultivating today. How is it that our forefathers knew that you have more calorie value and protein value in cereal? I call it the Rishi-Krishi combination. That is what has sustained the food security of India. How many people, if you want to know, get to know the data of it, you can go to ourworldindata.com where you find all these figures. But this is not what our academics speak. This is not what our media speaks. Food. Then I will go to shelter. You know, the average number of persons in a house in India is 4.5. In America, it is 2.5. Because we live with our father, we live with our grandfather, 3 generations live together, we share. This sharing is a very important part of economics. And if all Indians decide to follow the American model of husband and wife or on husband and wife, man and woman living together, 48% of the Americans live together without marriage. Only 28% of the Americans live together with a child in the family. If we follow the same way of life, we will need 135 million more houses. In America, to build 35 million houses, they had to spend $8.5 trillion. The damage to environment, it has been calculated by the European Union that every additional house means so much percentage of addition to CO2. But does anybody look at the Indian way of life? How it's by sharing we are able to manage the home economics. It is not in the... The third point is, America says that you pay the tax, we will take care of the elders. In India, it cannot happen. We are taking care of our elders. We are taking care of our children. The family system helps it. The State Bank of India study shows 80% of the parents live with their children in this country. And even widows live with the children only. This is the normal social arrangement. But this has huge macroeconomic consequence. Each one of the things I mentioned has a huge macroeconomic sense. And here I am coming to what you call as Atmanirbharta. It is not about importing goods or tariff. If you import the American lifestyle, whatever tariff you impose, you will not be able to save India, because India has to actually understand what is its way of life. Philosophy gives you the goal of life. The goal of life gives you the lifestyle. Lifestyle gives you the habits. Habits tell you what you need and don't need. It is a sum total understanding of the society. This is how Indian society works. You disturb the philosophy, everything will get disturbed. So, when we talk about Atmanirbharta, it is a total way in which the Indian society functions. And our food style, our shelter, the way we take care of our near and dear, all this has huge economic consequence. If all yearning Indians decide to disown their responsibilities towards people who are dependent on them, 75 crore people will be standing before the Prime Minister's house for 2 square meals a day. Do we understand Atmanirbharta like that? So much larger issue. For them it is economics. For us it is lifestyle. So we have to understand and deepen this knowledge about Atmanirbharta. I am happy that Arnab gave me an opportunity to talk about this. What I call as the umbrella view or a helicopter view of Indian economy, which is linked to the society, its philosophy, its way of life. And this is how we have to understand Atmanirbharta. Other countries may understand Atmanirbharta. Trump understands it only in terms of tariff. But for us, it is not just a tariff or economic issue, which is a much larger issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gurumurthy. So that was really an insightful session. Can we have a huge round of applause once again? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.